I declined to keep supporting my mooching brother, even though my mom pleaded with me to relent. I held firm. Living with my mom at 28 wasn't part of the plan, but life doesn't always turn out the way you expect. My dad passed away 4 years ago, and with my mom, Caroline, relying on a fixed pension, I moved back in to assist her. It wasn't glamorous, but it was practical. We split the bills, shared grocery costs, and maintained harmony in our modest home in Ville, Indiana. It was stable, manageable, and even comforting in its simplicity. But everything shifted the day my older brother Ryan returned. At 33, Ryan had always been the favorite in my mom's eyes, the golden child. Growing up, he was the one with grand ambitions, seemingly incapable of doing wrong. Years earlier, he moved to Chicago, chasing success in marketing, but his dreams didn't materialize. He lost his job in a round of layoffs, broke up with his girlfriend of 6 years, and drained his savings. Then, one day, he appeared on our doorstep with nothing but a suitcase, flimsy excuses, and a promise to get back on his feet. When I opened the door to see Ryan standing there, I wasn't shocked. The signs had been there for years. He was always careless with money and quick to shift blame when things went awry. But expecting it didn't make it easier to face. Mom, of course, was overjoyed. She hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face, and welcomed him inside like a soldier returning from war. "Just until I get things sorted out, Ev," Ryan said, as he dropped his suitcase on the living room floor. "I'm already setting up interviews. This is only temporary." I wanted to believe him, mostly for Mom's sake, but deep down, I wasn't convinced. The first few days were fine, though Ryan's presence immediately disturbed the balance we'd established. He sprawled across the couch, set up his gaming gear in the living room, and monopolized the TV for hours. I kept quiet, convincing myself he needed time to adjust. By the end of the first week, I was already regretting my silence. Ryan wasn't just staying with us, he was taking over. He slept in until noon most days, wandered into the kitchen groggy to grab a bowl of cereal, and spent the rest of his time gaming or scrolling on social media. When I asked about his job search, he brushed me off. "I've got leads," he'd say. "Just waiting for the right opportunity." Leads? I wasn't buying it. But Mom, ever the optimist, defended him. "He's had a tough year, Evan. Give him some time." I wanted to tell her that time wasn't what Ryan needed. He needed a reality check. But I didn't want to argue, especially considering all she'd been through, so I kept my frustrations bottled up for a while. Things escalated when I noticed notifications on Ryan's phone. Charges for in-game purchases like skins, loot boxes, and other frivolities. This from the same person who claimed he couldn't afford to pitch in for groceries. The first time he asked me to cover his share of the utilities, he swore it was a one-time favor. "I'll pay you back as soon as I get my first paycheck," he said. But that paycheck never materialized. One evening after dinner, I confronted him. "Ryan, when are you planning to start contributing? Mom and I can't keep covering for you." He shrugged, barely looking up from his game. "Relax, Ev. I told you. I'm working on it." Working on it was Ryan's go-to excuse, as empty as his promises to repay me. Mom, sitting at the dining table with a cup of tea, chimed in. "Evan, he's trying. You need to be more patient." Patient? I was running out of patience. But arguing with Ryan was like shouting into the void, and fighting with Mom only left me feeling guilty. So, once again, I let it go. The final straw came one evening when I got home from work and saw it. A brand new gaming chair. Sleek, pricey, and entirely unnecessary. Ryan was lounging in it like a king on his throne, headset on, shouting at his teammates in whatever game he was playing. I stood in the doorway, staring at the chair in disbelief. "Ryan," I said, my voice low and firm, "where did you get that?" He glanced over his shoulder, grinning. "Oh, this? I ordered it online. Stress purchase. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was. I couldn't fathom how someone could justify spending $600 on a chair while refusing to chip in for essentials. When they claimed they couldn't afford to split the water bill, my jaw clenched. Before I could respond, he turned his attention back to his game, oblivious to the anger building inside me. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every excuse Ryan had given since moving in. The gaming chair wasn't just furniture. It represented his entitlement and complete disregard for the burden he placed on Mom and me. Something had to change. But how do you confront someone who refuses to acknowledge there's a problem? How do you set boundaries with someone who doesn't care about crossing them? I didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was certain. Ryan wasn't going to change unless forced to. If I wanted peace restored at home, I would have to fight for it. After the incident with the gaming chair, pretending everything was fine became impossible. Ryan wasn't just a temporary guest. He had become a permanent source of stress. The atmosphere in the house shifted for the worse, with each day bringing a fresh reminder of how little Ryan cared about the effects of his behavior. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, thinking perhaps he was genuinely struggling, but staying sympathetic became difficult. Coming home from work to find him exactly as I'd left him, sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, surrounded by empty soda cans and snack wrappers, wore me down. It wasn't just the laziness, it was the sense of entitlement. Groceries became a constant source of frustration. I'd stock up on food, grabbing a few things I liked: specialty coffee, a pack of granola bars, maybe a frozen pizza as a treat. And within days, it would all be gone. Ryan didn't even bother hiding it. When I confronted him, he acted like I was being unreasonable. "It's just food, Evan," he said, as if that justified his actions. "Don't be so uptight." "It's not about the food," I shot back. "It's about respect. You don't contribute to groceries, but you're the first to help yourself to everything in the fridge." He shrugged and went back to his game, completely unaffected. Mom tried to intervene, but her efforts only made things worse. "Evan, he's your brother," she said. "Family helps family." "That's all I've been doing, Mom," I replied, "but he's taking advantage of us." Mom looked torn, guilt evident in her eyes. She still saw Ryan as the boy she'd raised, not the man-child who had turned our home into his personal playground. Then there were the bills. Ryan's constant, "I'll pay you back" promises piled up like a second mortgage. He didn't just miss payments, he ignored them entirely. When the water bill arrived with a shut-off notice, I had no choice but to cover it. That night, I confronted him again. "You need to start contributing," I said firmly. "This isn't fair to me or Mom." Ryan leaned back in his precious gaming chair, casually twirling a forkful of instant noodles, as though we were chatting about the weather. "Relax, Ev. I'll pay you back when I get a job." "Do you even have a plan?" I asked, frustration spilling over. "Because it sure doesn't look like you're trying." Ryan rolled his eyes. "I'm figuring it out. Not everyone lands a cushy job right out of college, you know." That comment left me speechless. My job was far from cushy. I worked long hours under stressful deadlines just to get by. Ryan had no idea what hard work meant because he'd never had to experience it. Mom had always softened his landings, and now I was expected to do the same. The tension at home became unbearable. Ryan's freeloading wasn't just a financial strain, it was emotional too. He played Mom and me against each other, painting himself as the victim whenever I called him out. Mom, bless her heart, always tried to see the best in him, even when there wasn't much to see. "He's going through a rough patch," she'd say. "He just needs a little patience." "How much patience is enough?" I asked. "He's not even looking for a job. He spends all day gaming or napping. This isn't a rough patch. It's laziness. Mom didn't have a response to that, but she still wouldn't push Ryan to take responsibility. And Ryan, of course, took full advantage of her soft spot. He knew she wouldn't kick him out, no matter how much trouble he caused. One day, a family friend named Mark stopped by for coffee, and while they were chatting in the kitchen, I overheard Mark mention that he had seen Ryan at a bar downtown during the afternoon. My attention was immediately caught. This was the same day Ryan had told us he had a job interview. "Are you sure it was Ryan?" I asked, stepping into the kitchen. "Absolutely," Mark replied. "He was there with a few guys, having a good time, looking carefree." My anger flared. I thanked Mark for the information and went straight to Ryan. "Did you even go to that interview?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. Ryan barely glanced up from his phone. "What are you talking about?" he asked. "Mark saw you at a bar that day. You lied to us." Ryan smirked, as if it were just a harmless prank. "Relax," he said. "The interview was a waste of time anyway." "That's not the point, Ryan," I snapped. "You're lying to us, and meanwhile, I'm covering your bills and picking up your slack." Ryan didn't even try to defend himself. He simply brushed me off, as if my frustration was an overreaction. That night, I decided I couldn't keep enabling him. Something had to change. The final straw came when I caught him going through my mail. I walked into the living room to find him flipping through an envelope from my bank. When I demanded to know what he was doing, he acted as though it wasn't a big deal. "Just curious," he said casually. "Stay out of my things," I said through clenched teeth. "If you touch my mail again, we're going to have a serious problem." Ryan laughed, clearly not taking me seriously, and that laugh lingered long after I went to bed, fueling the resolve building inside me. Ryan had crossed too many lines, and I was done letting it slide. By this point, I was counting down the days until I could confront him with a clear ultimatum. I didn't know how he would react, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living like this. Something had to change. Weeks of the same cycle with Ryan, excuses, broken promises, and a complete lack of responsibility, had passed, and the tension in the house grew thicker each day. I knew I couldn't keep waiting for him to change. So, one evening at dinner, I decided it was time to finally confront him. Mom had made her famous spaghetti, a meal she always cooked to ease tension. Unfortunately, it wasn't going to work this time. As we sat at the table, I took a deep breath and spoke up. "Ryan," I began, setting my fork down, "we need to talk about the bills." Ryan didn't even look up, too busy twirling his spaghetti like a carefree teenager. "What about them?" he asked. "You haven't paid your share in months," I replied. "You've been living here rent-free, eating our food, and treating this place like a hotel. It's not fair to Mom or me." Ryan leaned back in his chair and gave me the smirk I had come to hate. "Wow, Evan. Way to make dinner awkward. Can't this wait?" "No, it can't," I snapped. "I'm tired of carrying you. It's time for you to step up and contribute." Ryan rolled his eyes. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? Just because you have a steady job and no kids doesn't mean you can act so superior." "This isn't about me being better than you," I shot back. "It's about fairness. Mom and I are struggling to keep up with the bills while you sit here doing nothing." Mom tried to step in, her voice soft and trembling. "Evan, let's not turn this into a fight. Ryan's had a tough year." "Mom, I know you want to help him," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. "But enabling him isn't helping. He's not even trying. He spends all day gaming or watching TV." Ryan suddenly slammed his fork down, visibly upset. "You have no idea what I'm going through. I lost my job, my girlfriend, my apartment, everything. And now you're rubbing it in my face. What kind of brother are you?" "It's not about what you've been through," I said. my voice rising. It's about what you're doing now. And right now, you're doing nothing. The conversation quickly escalated into a full-blown shouting match. Ryan accused me of being selfish and unsupportive, claiming I didn't understand what it was like to struggle. Mom, caught in the middle, looked torn. Eventually, feeling helpless, Ryan pushed his chair away and stormed out of the room, shouting over his shoulder, "You're a real piece of work, Evan. Don't think I'm going to forget this." For the next few days, Ryan barely spoke to me. When he did, it was only to make passive-aggressive comments about how some people believe they're superior to others. Mom begged me to apologize to avoid conflict, but I refused. I wasn't the one in the wrong. The situation reached a new low when I got the water bill. Ryan's portion was once again unpaid, and this time the company warned they would cut off our water unless the full amount was paid. Furious, I paid it myself to prevent the shutoff, but I confronted Ryan the moment he came home. "Ryan, you promised you'd pay your share of the water bill," I said, holding up the bill as proof. He shrugged nonchalantly, clearly unaffected. "I'll pay you back when I can," he replied. "That's what you've been saying for months," I yelled. "Do you even hear yourself?" Ryan brushed past me, muttering, "Relax, man. It's just water." It wasn't just water. It was everything. It was the groceries he consumed without replacing them, the streaming services he used to rent movies and games without asking, and the way he treated my room like his personal storage space whenever I wasn't around. The last straw came when I caught him going through my mail again. This time, he didn't even pretend to not be snooping. He was sitting on the couch, flipping through an envelope from my bank when I walked in. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded. Ryan looked up, completely unfazed. "Chill out. I was just curious." "Curious about what?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. "This is private. Stay out of my stuff." Ryan smirked and tossed the envelope onto the coffee table. "You're so uptight. It's no wonder you're always stressed." That night, I sat down with Mom and told her I couldn't continue living like this. "I'm giving Ryan an ultimatum," I said. "He has 2 weeks to start paying his share of the bills, or he's out." Mom looked horrified. "Evan, you can't just kick him out. He's your brother." "He's draining us, Mom," I said. "I've tried to be patient, but he's not even trying. This has to stop." Mom didn't argue with me, but I could tell she was hoping it wouldn't come to that. I knew it would, though. Ryan had made it clear he wouldn't change unless he had no choice. The next morning, I told Ryan about the ultimatum. He laughed, dismissing it entirely. "You're bluffing," he said. "You wouldn't actually kick me out." "Try me," I replied, my voice cold and steady. "You've got 2 weeks, Ryan. Figure it out." For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, but it disappeared quickly, replaced by his usual cocky demeanor. "We'll see about that," he said, turning back to his game. As the days passed, Ryan made no effort to change. He didn't pay the bills, didn't help with groceries, and certainly didn't look for a job. It was as though he believed I wouldn't follow through. But I was ready. I had reached my breaking point and wasn't backing down. The deadline was drawing near, and I knew things were going to get complicated, but I didn't care. I had carried Ryan long enough. It was time for him to stand on his own or face the consequences. The deadline came and went, and Ryan hadn't changed a thing. He hadn't paid any bills, didn't contribute to groceries, or even attempted to find a job. If anything, he seemed more defiant, like he was testing how far I would let him push me. But this time, I wasn't bluffing. On the morning of the final day, I found him lounging in the living room, feet propped up on the coffee table, controller in hand. He didn't even look up when I walked in. "Ryan," I said, standing in front of the TV to get his attention, "your time's up. You need to pack your things and leave." He paused his game, leaned back in his outrageously expensive gaming chair, and asked, "You're really kicking me out after everything I've been through?" Yes, I said firmly. I gave you 2 weeks to step up, and you did nothing. I'm done carrying you. Ryan's face twisted with anger. Unbelievable. You're abandoning your own brother when I need you the most. What would Dad think of you right now? That hit a nerve, but I didn't let it affect me. Don't bring Dad into this. It's about your decisions, not his legacy. You've been exploiting Mom and me for months, and it needs to stop now. Ryan stood up abruptly, his voice rising. You don't care about family. All you care about is money. You're a selfish, arrogant jerk. That's enough, I snapped. Pack your things and leave. This is your choice, Ryan. You decided not to change. Mom entered just as Ryan's shouting grew louder. She glanced between us, her face reflecting both concern and fatigue. What's happening? I'm kicking him out, I replied. It's been 2 weeks, and he hasn't done anything. Ryan turned to her with pleading eyes. You're really going to let him do this to me, your own son? Mom hesitated, torn as she always was, but this time she didn't rush to his defense. Ryan, she said gently, maybe it's time for you to figure things out on your own. Ryan was stunned, unable to believe she wasn't supporting him. Unreal, he muttered, shaking his head. You're both unbelievable. It took him 3 more days to leave, and he made sure to create as much disruption as possible on his way out. He left piles of trash and random clutter all over the house. His room was a mess. Old clothes, empty soda cans, and food wrappers crammed into corners. He didn't bother cleaning anything up. He just grabbed his gaming chair and a couple of bags, stormed out without saying a word. The day after he left, I went into his room to begin cleaning. The smell hit me hard, like a punch. Stale food, spilled soda, and something else I didn't even want to name. Plates with leftover food were shoved under the bed, and one of the trash bags had leaked onto the carpet, leaving a dark, sticky stain. I spent hours scrubbing, vacuuming, and airing out the room. By the time I was finished, I was exhausted, but at least the house felt a little more livable. As I sorted through the mess, I noticed a few things were gone. My noise-canceling headphones, a couple of gift cards I'd kept in my desk, and even an old watch Dad had given me. At first, I thought I'd misplaced them, but the more I searched, the clearer it became. Ryan had taken them. I confronted Mom, hoping she might have seen him with the items. Her face fell when I mentioned the watch. He said he needed the headphones, she admitted reluctantly. But I thought he was just borrowing them. Borrowing them, I repeated. He didn't even ask. Mom had no answer, and I didn't press her. It wasn't her fault that Ryan had turned out like this, but it hurt to see her so disillusioned. A week later, I received a call from our landlord. Apparently, there had been noise complaints while Ryan was still living with us. Neighbors reported loud music and yelling late at night, which I hadn't noticed due to my long work hours. The landlord wasn't pleased and warned us that any more complaints could lead to penalties. It was embarrassing to explain that Ryan had already moved out and that I would make sure it didn't happen again. As if that wasn't enough, I started getting calls from debt collectors. Ryan had left some unpaid bills behind, and since we shared an address, they tracked me down. The collectors were relentless, calling at all hours and refusing to accept no for an answer until I threatened to report them. Then came the online drama. Ryan took to social media, portraying himself as the victim. According to his posts, I had kicked him out with no warning, leaving him homeless and destitute. He painted me as a heartless monster, and a few extended family members bought into his story. They called and texted, chastising me for being so cruel and ungrateful. I didn't have the energy to explain everything to everyone. Thankfully, not everyone believed him. Neighbors and a few close family friends who had witnessed the chaos firsthand stepped in to support me. One even lent me cleaning supplies to deal with the mess Ryan had left behind. Their kindness reminded me that not everyone was willing to enable Ryan's behavior. Finally, Mom admitted that she should have been firmer with him. "I didn't realize how bad it had gotten," she said quietly. "I just didn't want to give up on him." "You're not giving up on him, Mom." I told him that I was simply setting boundaries and that he needed to learn to be independent. We sat down together and came up with a new financial plan, agreeing that no one, regardless of family ties, would live in the house without contributing. It was a tough conversation, but it felt like progress. As for Ryan, he found a place to stay with a friend and posted online about starting fresh. However, I wasn't optimistic. Knowing Ryan, it was only a matter of time before he messed that up as well. Despite the turmoil, I felt a sense of relief. The house was quiet again, the bills were under control, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. I wished it hadn't come to this, but at least Mom and I could finally move forward. 2 months had passed since Ryan left, and life was beginning to feel normal again. The house was calm, the bills were manageable, and I didn't have to worry about missing groceries or unpaid utilities. Mom seemed more at ease too, as though a weight had been lifted. For the first time in years, it felt like we were getting back on track. However, peace is often short-lived when it comes to Ryan. One Sunday afternoon, I was in the backyard fixing a loose fence board when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. Turning around, I saw Ryan stepping out with a duffel bag in hand, wearing that same confident smirk that always made my stomach churn. "Hey, Evie," he called out as though nothing had happened. "Mom home?" "What are you doing here?" I asked, walking over to meet him at the side of the house. "You're not supposed to just show up like this." Ryan shrugged, throwing the duffel bag over his shoulder. "I need a place to stay. My roommate kicked me out. Total toxic environment, man. I couldn't take it anymore." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my temper in check. "Toxic and rent issues? Or did you just fail to pay again?" Ryan's smirk faltered briefly before he recovered. "That's not important. The point is, I had no choice but to leave. So here I am." Before I could reply, Mom had come outside to see what was going on. Her face lit up when she saw Ryan, and before I could stop her, she was guiding him inside. In no time, he was sitting in the living room, acting like he owned the place again. This time, I didn't waste any time. "Ryan, no," I said firmly. "You can't move back in, not after everything that happened." Ryan looked at me like I had slapped him. "Seriously? You're still holding a grudge? I said I'd pay you back, didn't I?" "You said that for months," I replied, "and you never did. You trashed the house, stole my stuff, and left us with unpaid bills. You're not coming back here." Mom, who had been sitting quietly, finally spoke up. "Evan's right. Ryan, you need to figure this out on your own." Ryan's jaw dropped. "Mom, you're siding with him? I'm your son." "Exactly," she said softly. "And it's time for you to take responsibility for your life." Ryan's expression darkened. "Fine. I'll find somewhere else to stay. But I just need a little help first. Can you loan me some money? Just enough for a deposit on a new place?" "I promise. I'll pay it back." I sighed, already seeing where this was headed. "How much are you asking for?" Ryan rattled off a figure that made my jaw tighten. It wasn't a small amount, and it was clear he had no plan. It was just another excuse to avoid taking responsibility. "No," I said. "You're not getting any more money from us. You've burned that bridge, Ryan." Ryan's face turned red. "You're unbelievable, Evan. You act like you're so much better than me, but you don't know what it's like to struggle." "Don't twist this," I shot back. "You're not struggling. You're freeloading." "There's a difference." Mom looked heartbroken, but she didn't argue. I could tell she wanted to help him, but even she couldn't deny the truth anymore. Ryan, as usual, refused to take any blame. He accused me of holding a grudge, of abandoning family, and even claimed Dad would be ashamed of me. When that didn't work, he started yelling loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. He accused us of turning our backs on him and ruining his life. By the time he stormed off, throwing his duffel bag into the car and speeding down the driveway, I was drained but determined. Later that evening, Mom and I had a conversation. She confessed that she wished she had handled things differently from the beginning. "I just wanted to help him," she said, her voice filled with regret. "I didn't realize how much damage it was causing." "It's not your fault, Mom," I replied. "You did what you thought was best, but now we have to stick to our boundaries, for both of our sakes." For a while, things were calm. Ryan didn't reach out, and I hoped it would stay that way. However, about a week later, I came home from work and sensed something was wrong. The back door, which we always kept locked, was slightly open. My stomach dropped as I walked inside and noticed several items were missing. My gaming console, an old laptop, a watch Dad had given me, and a small box of Mom's jewelry. The house wasn't ransacked, but it was clear that whoever had taken the items knew exactly what they were looking for. My mind immediately went to Ryan, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions without proof. The next day, I spoke to a neighbor who had a security camera facing our street. They kindly checked the footage for me, and there it was. Ryan sneaking into the house late at night, climbing through the back window with a backpack. He left 20 minutes later, the bag noticeably fuller. Armed with the footage, I showed it to Mom. She was heartbroken. "I didn't want to believe he'd go this far," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "What do we do?" I called Ryan and confronted him. At first, he denied everything, insisting he had no idea what I was talking about. But when I mentioned the security footage, his story changed. "Fine," he said. "I took the stuff. I needed money for rent. I was going to pay you back." "That's not how this works, Ryan," I said. "You stole from us. That's unforgivable." Mom begged me not to call the police, but I knew we couldn't let this go. Ryan had crossed too many lines. Reluctantly, I filed a report, using the security footage as evidence. The fallout was swift. Ryan cut off all communication with us, calling us traitors and accusing us of ruining his life. Some extended family members sided with him, believing his sob story. It stung, but I stood my ground. I wasn't going to let him manipulate us anymore. About a month later, we heard Ryan had been arrested for shoplifting electronics from a local store. It wasn't surprising, but it was still painful to see how far he had fallen. Despite everything, I hoped this would be the wake-up call he needed, but I wasn't holding my breath. For now, Mom and I focused on rebuilding, cleaning up the mess he had left behind, both literal and emotional. The house finally felt like a safe space again. While the trust between us and Ryan might never be restored, I knew we were better off without the chaos. Sometimes, loving someone means letting them face the consequences of their actions. It wasn't easy, but it was the only way forward. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful. Ryan's story was his to tell, but I was determined to write my own. A story of peace, stability, and moving on.